Hello, everyone, and welcome to the interview here with Jaynemesis, one of our unpopular investors. Jay has been trading on a platform for a number of years, and at the present moment, when everyone is in coronavirus or COVID-19 lockdown and understanding that the markets are dropping off a cliff, Jay himself has had a green month every month this year and is up about 23%. Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself first before we go into the interview.
Yeah, so my name's Jay, obviously. I'm from the UK. I've been on eToro since 2014, I think, the start of 2014. I joined after I saw that they added Bitcoin. I thought that was a good excuse to try out the platform. Never really expected to become a popular investor. I was just trading for myself. My history before trading, I worked in the esports industry, first in logistics, helping manage all of the equipment for events, and then on the actual event management side a bit more. That's pretty much it, really. I started trading full-time on eToro in, I think it was mid-2017. I quit my job, and I've been doing eToro ever since.
So how was that transition? That's a big step from being full-time employed to actually now being a full-time trader. What was the good and bad bit about both of them?
I mean, honestly, everything went incredibly smoothly. So, I wouldn't say there were really any negatives, at least not at the start. I'd already kind of got to elite level on eToro by then, and I was feeling pretty confident, I guess. So maybe that helped.
So is it true as a trader's lifestyle, you get up about 1 o'clock in the day, work around in your tracksuit all day doing very, very little, or is that completely different to actually a trader's lifestyle?
I think it's probably somewhere in between, to be honest. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I probably get up at about 11 most days because the US market is what I'm interested in, and not much else. And since that doesn't close until 9, I kind of have to shift my entire day forward a bit. But at the same time, I don't walk around in my underwear or anything like that. I do spend most of the day either looking at the charts or communicating with my copiers or working on research for some of my investments.
Okay, perfect. So how did you get into trading? I know you said a little bit earlier on that eToro had a Bitcoin and that's why you decided to come in with us. But how did you get into trading in the first place?
Sorry, everyone in the chat's saying that it's muted, but I'm pretty sure that must be just them because it's not everyone. What was the question? Sorry, I was distracted by the chat.
Yeah, we're not on Love Island here. It's not about the chat.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So you said that you actually come over to eToro because they had a Bitcoin. So that's how you started with the likes of eToro. But how did you start trading in the first place?
I've always been really fascinated by any sort of a system, really, since the age of about like 13. I guess it probably started when I had Lego and Connects, and I just liked the kind of logical system of it, and then it kind of evolved from there into liking things like railways and then things like networks, which is obviously how I found Bitcoin and esports. I actually had a startup that was tournament systems. So I've always been interested in systems, and one of the systems that I found most interesting was, of course, the markets, right? Like this concept of the markets and how they work, and effectively how really it is like the game of money, right? It is essentially just a game of trying to maximize returns and maximize your earning potential, I guess, throughout life. And I always figured that the best way of making money is by investing it. So from probably about the age of 14, 13, I started watching CNBC, and I started just, educating myself online, entirely self-taught, never read a book, never took a trading course. And I just, dove into it, really. And by the time I was 19, I started trading.
So you say there about the e-gaming. Were you one of these people who were lucky enough to actually have invested in Bitcoin when it was about 20p?
Not quite that low. My first Bitcoin, I think, was about £25 though. So, and I still have it. So that's yeah. It was a good time to invest. It was very risky though.
Is that congratulations or commiserations? Because you know, I mean, it's now dropped quite a bit from 20,000.
Yeah, but the only Bitcoin I ever bought outside of the trades on eToro and a few other exchanges, where I've sold some, but the only Bitcoins that I've really kind of added to my stash were back in 2013 and 2014. So for me, I'm well in the thousands of percent of profit on all of it. So it doesn't really bother me too much, to be honest.
Good. And so why then, if you're someone who has the likes of Bitcoin stashed away like a little squirrel, why did you decide to become a popular investor?
I didn't really. It was all just a fluke. I was trading away on eToro, and then someone finally got through to my mobile phone number, and they said that I think the first thing that they said when they got through was that they've spoken to my mum about 6 times to try and find my actual phone number. So obviously I wasn't living at home anymore, but that was the number that was registered with eToro. So yeah, they've been trying to contact me for a while, and they said, look, you've been profitable almost every year you've been on eToro. Please become a popular investor. We think you're well suited to it. Your risk and everything is already perfect for it. So I think the first question I asked in response to that was, do I have to pay anything? And when he said no, I was like, sure, why not? And yeah, it just kind of exploded from there.
So it was a win-win situation for you then.
Yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, one of the, I would say one of the defining moments of my life so far.
Good. So we're at eToro. We're here. We're changing people's lives. That's good.
Yeah.
Now you've been copied over 9,000 times, and that's a lot of trust from people, and it's a lot of money to be trading. So for the new people who are actually wanting to come in and actually potentially follow you, what words would you give them that to show you the trust that you give your clients and to give them moving forward as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things you can look at really. The first is, I would say, take a deep dive into my stats on eToro. You can see the 3 most popular assets that I trade at the moment. SolarEdge, AMD, some of the stocks I trade regularly. I have something around 95% profitable trades, and the profits are bigger than the losses. Obviously, if you go through my actual stats as well, even if you compound every single year, if you copied for anything over 3 years, no matter when you started, you'll be in profit at the moment. So I think, in the long term, currently, obviously, past results, don't take everything for granted. But so far, it's been profitable for anyone who's stuck with me for a long period of time, and a lot of people that weren't copying me for that long as well. So I think that's hopefully a pretty good reason. And the other thing is that, as I said earlier, I do this full time. I quit my job to do this. I'm really passionate about this. This is what I dream about when I go to sleep. It's the first thing I check when I wake up. The girlfriend's very disappointed because the first thing I talk about, is trading every day. So, she's like my support network almost, I guess.
Well, that's something that traders will do naturally. But to have a girlfriend, you're doing well, and trading full time at the same time, that's you're doing well. So we have a question here from one of the clients online. Is the biggest setbacks or challenges while trading, and what's your next steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of biggest setbacks, I guess you mean, and challenges. I would say when you're drawn down for more than 2 months, that's when I think that's when pressure can get to you, and it's really important to just go back to what made you open those trades in the first place, and kind of reanalyze the positions, and not get too hooked up on on the pressure or on copiers and things like that. The other thing is not to look at the money as well, right? Because when I first started trading, I was trading with $2,000, and every time I made or lost $100, I was, oh, that's a lot of money. That's 10 pizzas, Jay. Don't lose those 10 pizzas. But obviously now, I'm trading with currently around $14.5 million of AUM. Obviously that's quite a lot more pizzas, and if I kind of think about it that way for too long, then it can influence your decision making. So I find it's best to just look at everything as a percentage, and then that way you're not too scared of losing money or making money, and you just trade as normal.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So you said something there about your losses are smaller than your wins, and your wins are greater. Why is that quite important?
Well, I mean, there's several phrases in trading. I don't claim to know any of them properly, but essentially they all go along the lines of, you want to cut your losses and run your winners. And it's a lot easier said than done. It's very easy, for people when they set stop losses to just move it down and move it down and move it down. And that can be a dangerous game. You have to know when you enter a trade or an investment. If it's long term or short term, doesn't really matter. You have to know when your get out point is. When you want to remove that risk and just accept the loss and move on. So yeah, I think it's pretty important to do that. I don't claim to be that good on everything, but on the main stuff I trade, that is the case. So.
Okay, so you said to me there that we have 9,000 copiers and you have 14 million under AUM. How does that make you feel to be one of the most copied people on eToro?
I don't know really. It took a bit of getting used to the first time I started dealing with those kind of numbers. Certainly it can be difficult to communicate with everyone clearly. You get a lot of questions every day, and trying to balance that with trading and posting updates and doing your research is a tricky thing to do. But overall, yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable. I've been doing this for a while now, so I think I'm pretty well used to it. Once you get over 1,000, it all just kind of merges into the realms of this is insane anyway. So, diminishing fear returns, I would say.
So, what's your strategy? Where do you do your research? I know we talked a little bit about the technical versus fundamental, a little bit offline, but what's your strategy now for trading?
Yeah, so I always start with product, and the thing that I look for in product is disruption, right? So that doesn't matter to me too much as long as it's within the kind of realms of technology. It doesn't matter if it's a self-driving technology or cryptocurrency technologies, or if it's something entirely different. If Domino's came out tomorrow with drone delivery, then that is something that I think is pretty disruptive to the pizza market. And those are the sorts of things that I'm constantly looking out for. And incidentally, that is exactly what helped me navigate the coronavirus situation so well, is that I was watching the situation in China in mid-January before it was really on the news at all, to be honest, and just watching the whole thing unfolding on Twitter and figuring that this could be disruptive. And the good thing about investing in disruptive companies is that generally, because they are disruptive, they're just already immune to these sorts of things. Most of my portfolio stayed the same because the companies that I'm invested in are already, ahead of the trend in terms of, pushing everything online and working from home and all of these sorts of trends.
So for the general members of the public, what do you mean by disruptive?
So anything that really is going to shake up the industry. If you've got an advantage that is just so far ahead of where everyone else is at, when Tesla released the Model S, and it's the first electric car with over 200 miles of range, and none of the competitors had even reached 100 miles of range at that point. Even the Nissan Leaf and cars like that, which are that's actually still the most successful car in Europe, electric car vehicle in Europe. ahead of the Teslas for the time being, at least. They might lose that title this year, but it kind of shows just how dominant they were. And how much they committed to that move as well. The amount of R&D spending, Ford, for example, have only just this year matched Tesla on R&D spending, and it's taken them all of this time to move in that direction. And when you're a big company, it takes a long time to kind of shift gears and make those kind of big decisions like that. So yeah. Anything like, it's about new business models as well, building ecosystems. Those are the sorts of things that I look out for.
Okay, so the market has been very volatile over the last 2 to 3 months. Now, have you changed your strategy at all? I know we touched on a little bit there, but
yeah, I did change it a bit. So, as I said, there are a lot of companies that I was already invested in that were well positioned to handle it. And if anything, kind of made me even more confident in them. So companies like Microsoft, for example, Amazon, etc. But I think the main thing I did is I started to look into something that I haven't really done that much of before, which is really look at dividends yields a lot more. So one of the positions that's still one of my biggest positions at the moment, and it's not just because of their dividend, is Home Depot in America. Absolutely huge company.
Okay.
And yeah, that was a big part of it. And I switched much more towards a growth investing, value investing style rather than a growth investing style. So where normally I'm looking at the big tech companies, and as I said, these disruptive go-getters that are spending all of their income immediately as soon as they get it, to try and keep building that advantage. I switch much more to the safe guys that have got good books that are well positioned to navigate through these times.
And just a question: what exactly is dividend?
Yeah, so a dividend is basically essentially a payment that is paid out usually quarterly, but it can vary from a company. There's actually some interesting research into dividends that suggests that effectively it just replaces the gains that a stock might make. So, if a stock would normally go up 5%, and instead they're paying out all of that profit to their shareholders through dividends, then it will actually go up by 0%, but you'll get the 5% payout. And in that situation, that is exactly what makes it so worth having during these periods, because if the entire stock market is going down at the same rate anyway, because everyone's selling ETFs and things like that, you might as well get paid while you're holding it. That's the way I see it. So yeah, dividend is basically just a payment that goes out to everyone who owns shares in companies.
Okay, so it's worth having a few of those then in your portfolio at some stage.
I think during this kind of time period, yeah, because you never know how bad it's going to be, how long it's going to last. There's a lot of speculation about the economic impact, and so far the markets are broadly ignoring that, but we just don't know. No anyone who says that they know where the market's going to be in 6 months or 12 months from now, I think is lying, to be completely honest. So you've got to take a somewhat defensive stance, and kind of be prepared to have either your portfolio weather it or be prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that come your way. And I try and do both.
And talking about taking advantage, what companies sort of do you have your eyes on that might have potential upside on or positive impact with this coronavirus, the way it's after slowly subsiding?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be some interesting potential obviously in the airline industry. There will be some good buys eventually. I think now is too early to really be looking at them. The same with automotives as well. So I think the advantage that Tesla had is being closed by companies like VW. So I think those kind of stocks are really interesting to look at once we've seen a bit more clarity on the economy as a whole, because one thing you don't want to do is try and catch a falling knife, right? You don't want to jump in too early. But certainly, if you've got a lot of your balance in cash, then that's a good place to be in, and starting to slowly build up those positions in companies like that, I think is good. Netflix was obviously one that everyone jumped on early, as was Zoom. I think there's a lot of potential elsewhere in the market as well, though. I think one of the things that this has drawn a lot of attention to is climate change. And the atmosphere and the pollution around us. Everyone's been talking about how fresh the air is outside. So I think that we will see a bigger focus on by governments and by businesses on pushing in that direction afterwards. So I think it's also a good opportunity to look at those kind of companies, especially given the volatility that's going on in oil and things like that.
Okay, cool. And what's your thoughts on crypto at the moment? We have the halving coming up very shortly. So what's your thoughts on crypto as a whole?
It's interesting. I always find it fascinating how there's like this big buzz around the halving approaching every year. And every time the halving actually happens, everyone's like, yay, and everyone drinks a beer, and then nothing happens. And nothing happens for two reasons. The first reason is that really it's kind of a non-event, right? The only people that are really affected by it are the miners, and most miners will be preparing for long in advance and kind of deciding on their strategy, and really they can only do so much until they see what the price is, and so yeah, I guess it's an interesting time. Like if you look back at some of the previous halvings, yes, the price has gone up afterwards, but usually it's been over the course of a year or so. So I think it's very important to make sure that you have some exposure, right? Because history rhymes, it doesn't repeat. So yeah, it's probably going to go up. No one knows when it's going to go up, so you're better off having some exposure. But really, I think Bitcoin responds most to technical analysis at the moment. I really don't think fundamentals play that big of a role in it currently. So yeah, I think you've got to have good TA game.
That there again, please, Jay?
Yeah, I think.
Can you repeat that there, Jay? Just.
I think I know why you are a TA guy.
I'm a technical analyst.
Yeah, well,
good. I'm delighted that you've just said that.
Bitcoin is what you should be trading.
Brilliant. So, yeah, but that's not advice. That's just your opinion. So is that cool? Yeah. So what do you think of oil, Jay?
Well, so. Oil is interesting. I made a lot of good money shorting oil recently. I think I probably got some of the best closing prices out of anyone on eToro, actually. I closed some of my shorts down at like $7.50, somewhere around there, shorting from $16, $17. So that was nice. And since I did that, everyone is asking me why I don't trade oil all of the time. And I think if you go and look at some of my more recent trades in oil, you'll find out why. The other thing about oil is personally, I consider myself a pretty big environmentalist, and so I just don't agree with going long on oil, to be honest. I don't really think that there's that much need for it. Obviously, we need oil for all sorts of things, and we can't just replace oil overnight. Oil is very important to all sorts of different industries, petrochemicals and all of this sorts of things, even plastic. We can't survive without plastic. But for me, I only ever short oil, and I don't trade it often, only if I see a really clear opportunity. So don't expect me to be trading oil too much. Maybe a few trades a year is more like what I would normally do.
It's okay, because I'm on the other side. I'm now long in it, so I'm happily take the money out of the wrong side. So how would you compare eToro as a trading platform compared to the other platforms that you've used?
So I've only actually used one other platform in terms of equities. I've used quite a few for cryptocurrencies, but I mean, obviously, there's one very clear thing that I think sets eToro apart, and that's the community, right? Most things don't have that. Maybe some of the very early crypto exchanges had a troll box. Yeah, Trollbox, BTCE, back in the day before it got taken down. Yeah, so eToro is great because you do have some trolling on eToro, and you have some good banter, as people put it, some good memes, but you also have some really good analysis. by all sorts of people, not just popular investors, and some good comments and good feedback as well, and a real good community spirit, I think. So I think obviously that's the thing that sets it apart, to be honest. You don't really get that anywhere else. I can't even think of another exchange that's got a news feed, to be honest. So.
So what instruments do you use to analyze your stocks?
In terms of technical analysis?
Well, both. Why not both of them?
Yeah, so I mean, for fundamentals, obviously, so I'm actually a really big fan of earnings calls, and not just reading the transcripts or kind of looking for some highlights, but actually listening to them. I usually listen to them live. Obviously, it's difficult to do when you're invested in like 20 different stocks because, today, for example, there are several companies who've got earnings this evening that I'm invested in. So you can't listen to everything. But I do find that that's actually really useful. You can tell a lot from the language that people use and the things that they don't say and how long they pause for, things like that. It's really, really interesting. Especially also it can be pretty fun when you're listening to calls from Tesla and you're just waiting for Elon Musk to do something crazy. So Tesla price is slightly too high, in my opinion. But
so you really go into detail with reading people's body language and how long they pause and stuff like that. Is that a real thing?
I mean, I wouldn't say I go into detail, but I definitely think that you can pretty clearly, it's like a politician, right? You learn to read between the lines. You learn to see which questions they aren't answering when they're asked a question and how many times that question gets asked through the earnings call. And sometimes they slip up as well and they say things that they perhaps, shouldn't necessarily have said in the call or shouldn't have phrased the way that they did. Because of the fact that it's a live environment, right? Like they don't have pre-prepared responses for all of these questions in most cases. So I find that it can be really telling, and you just don't get that from reading a transcript. Other stuff I use, basic stuff, price to earnings ratio, looking through the income statements and everything, looking through filings with the SEC, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so we'll just actually go into a little more detail on that. So when you're about to make a decision on a trade, so you've looked into the fundamentals, you've done all that sort of stuff. Now you're about to place your trade. Now, before you do your trade, you probably do another last bit of analysis. Is that technical, or is that one final thing on fundamentals that you do?
Usually it's technical. Usually I will look at the charts. I mean, if I'm completely honest, sometimes the fundamentals are strong enough, and if I know that I'm going to be building a big position, I'll just open a position pretty much immediately. Especially if it's a long-term trade, the difference in the price now and 5 hours time or 2 days time is pretty negligible. If you're going to hold a trade over the course of a year or something, and you're expecting 30% gains, So sometimes you don't really need to do that much more, but I do generally use moving averages, the RSI, just really, really simple support resistance levels, basic chart patterns to kind of just make sure on a 30-minute, 1 hour, and daily kind of time frames, just to make sure that I'm happy that I'm not about to get wrecked by the market, if that makes sense, because the markets are not a perfect machine, right? There's common economists will always tell you that the market is really, really, really efficient, but if it was efficient, then we wouldn't have a job. So it's all about making sure that it is reasonably priced and that you're not getting in at some insanely high valuation.
Okay, so this is an interesting question from one of our clients: is how much do you vary between management versus investing versus day trading? Do you have a fixed percent of your portfolio allocated to one of them?
I don't actually. I'm pretty loose with it. I mean, I've never gone anywhere near day trading with anything over like 30 or 40% of my portfolio. But I think I've probably done day trading with 10% of my portfolio sometimes, and over a couple of days. So, I'm pretty flexible with it, to be honest. I think, I kind of, it depends to some extent. It depends on my mood during the day, right? Like I have to be in the right mood to be really watching charts all day. You can't force yourself to trade. You have to be in the right state of mind. The market has to be in the right conditions for that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, even with day trades, I'm always day trading stuff that I'm actually bullish on long term, and I almost always trade with that trend as well. So I won't bet against something that I am very bullish on for the long term, and I won't day trade something that I just know nothing about except oil, like I did recently. So yeah, sometimes I will, but most of the time, I'm pretty strict on that stuff.
So probably the last question of the day is are any parts of your day more important to be sitting in front of a trading screen / open or close, or do you do the analysis and research when the market is closed? Now, I think you've already sort of touched a little bit on that, but what's the best time of day to be sitting in front of your screen?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm in front of my, most of the time I'm going to be in front of my charts all day. Even if I'm at my computer and I'm doing something entirely separate, even if I'm just playing a game, I have dedicated screens for my charts so that I can keep track of what's going on. But in terms of, really focusing, I think, anyone who's a seasoned trader will tell you that the most volume happens in the first half an hour and the last half an hour of the markets for equities. So those are really important times. For cryptocurrencies, obviously you've got weekends to take into consideration, and they are generally pretty sporadic. There's some sort of unwritten rules in cryptocurrency to never trust a breakout that happens over a weekend. Yeah, you've got to keep an eye on it over the weekend. There's actually some pretty good opportunities over weekends, and as I said just now, they actually have a tendency to retrace. Yeah, you just kind of, for me, I always have it open. My PC is on 99% of the time, even when I'm asleep. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and I've got an idea for a trade, I will come downstairs and have a look at it. Yeah, that's the way I do it.
And how often does that happen?
More often than it should, to be honest. When I said that I dream about trades, I wasn't lying.
Okay, cool. Well, look, thanks, Jay. Anyone who is interested, I am running a trading school, which means that you can actually learn how to trade the technicals. I run every Tuesday. I run a little course for people who go through an hour from 1 till 2 about what markets is heading up, what I'm looking at, where I think the markets are going to go, so on and so forth, and give you my insight into the markets. Now that happens every Tuesday. You see the little click for the next webinar on your little right hand side. If you click on that there, it'll register you for my next webinar. But a big thank you to Jay. Jay, do you want to tell everyone what's your name on eToro so they can actually follow you? And Thank you very much, and take us home.
Yeah, so obviously follow me on eToro. My name is Jaynemesis on there. I also tweet a lot. I post some stuff onto YouTube. So yeah, be sure to give me a follow. Feel free to ask questions. I like answering questions. Can't promise that I'll always answer them because I do get quite a few, especially after 1,000 of you tune into this thing. But yeah, I'll try my best to respond to everyone.
All right, thank you very much and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.